In the northern reaches of Florida, a body of water the size of a small town has a habit of disappearing. Not slowly, through evaporation, and not catastrophically, through a dam break. It vanishes from the bottom up. Lake Jackson, a 4,000-acre prairie lake, has emptied itself again. Roughly 12 billion gallons of water have swirled down a series of holes in the lakebed, leaving behind a vast 2-square-mile expanse of cracked mud, stranded boats, and bewildered wildlife. The water did not go into the sky. It went into the ground. This process has become a viral spectacle. In June of 2021, drone footage captured the final moments of the lake's central basin, showing a vortex of water pouring into a feature known as Porterhole Sink. The images are disorienting. A body of water famous for largemouth bass fishing, reduced to a river spiraling into the earth. It is a strange thought, an entire landscape having a drain. Curious what you think about this, actually. But here is the part that defies easy explanation. This is not an anomaly. It is a cycle. And that cycle is breaking. To understand how a lake can simply pull its own plug, you have to look beneath the surface. Not just beneath the water, but beneath the ground itself. The entire region, from Tallahassee south to the Gulf of Mexico, sits atop a geological formation called the Woodville Karst Plain. Karst is a landscape shaped by water-dissolving rock. For millions of years, slightly acidic rainfall has percolated through the ground, eating away at the soft, porous limestone that forms the bedrock of Florida. This process has carved an immense subterranean world of caverns, conduits, and underground rivers. The longest underwater cave system in the United States, the Wakulla Spring cave system, spiders its way through this darkness. Lake Jackson rests directly on top of this hollowed-out foundation. It is a specific type of lake known as a solution basin, which formed as the limestone underneath it sagged and dissolved over millennia, creating a shallow depression. For most of its life, the bottom of this depression is sealed by a dense plug of clay, sand, and organic sediment. This plug functions like a cork in a bottle. But what holds that cork in place is not just friction. It is pressure. Beneath the Karst Plain lies the second piece of the puzzle, the upper Floridan Aquifer. This is one of the most productive aquifers in the world, a massive underground reservoir of fresh water held within the limestone. When rainfall is plentiful, the aquifer is full, and its water table is high. This creates immense upward hydrostatic pressure, pushing against the bottom of the sediment plug in Lake Jackson, effectively locking it into place. The lake remains full, a seemingly permanent feature of the landscape. Then a drought arrives. When rainfall diminishes for a prolonged period, two things happen simultaneously. The lake stops receiving new water from its 27,000-acre drainage basin, and people across the region begin to pump more water from the aquifer for drinking and irrigation. The water table of the Floridan Aquifer begins to drop. As it falls, the upward pressure supporting the lake's sediment plug weakens. The water below the plug is no longer pushing up as hard as the billions of gallons of lake water are pushing down. At a certain point, the balance tips. The sediment plug collapses inward, and the lake begins to drain directly into the cavernous network of the aquifer below. It becomes a giant, earth-lined funnel. The primary drain is a feature called Porterhole Sink, located in the southern portion of the lake. During a full dry down, it can present as a gaping, 28-foot wide chasm in the mud. A second, smaller drain, Lime Sink, sits at the northern end. When the plug at Porterhole fails, the effect is dramatic. The event of June 2021 was captured with astonishing clarity, but it was just a prelude. The dry down that began over Thanksgiving week of 2025 was an order of magnitude more severe. After months of an extreme drought designation by the National Weather Service, the plug gave way. Over the next 5 months, the lake emptied almost completely, the waterline receding day by day, leaving docks hundreds of yards from the new shoreline. The 12 billion gallons of water were gone by the spring of 2026. The lake had become a desert. This is the part the headlines do not capture. The disappearance of Lake Jackson is not a new story, but an ancient one. The indigenous Muskogee people who lived here for centuries named this place Okie-Heepki. The name directly translates to disappearing waters. They knew the lake's secret. They had watched it vanish and return, a rhythm of nature tied to the rains. The first state geologist of Florida, Elias Howard Sellards, provided the first official scientific documentation of a dry down in 1907. He described a basin that had recently lost its water, exposing the sinkholes in its floor. His report confirmed that what the Muskogee had known for generations was a geological reality. The lake was not permanent. For most of the 20th century, this rhythm was predictable, almost generational. The lake would drain significantly roughly once every 25 years. There were major dry downs documented in 1907, a long gap, then again in the 1930s, and most famously in 1956. That 1956 event, triggered by another severe drought, pushed the local community to a point of desperation. Lakefront property owners, boaters, and fishermen watched their prized amenity turn into an enormous mudflat. They decided they could not wait for nature to fix the problem. They were going to fix it themselves. In an astonishing display of human ingenuity meeting geological force, a group of locals hatched a plan. Believing the sinkholes were simple holes that could be plugged like a leak in a bucket, they began dumping debris into them. They threw in junked automobiles, crushing them and rolling them into the openings of Porterhole Sink and Lime Sink. They followed the cars with old appliances, tangled wire, and anything else they could find. Then, they brought in truckloads of concrete and poured it on top, trying to create an artificial, permanent seal. They were at war with the Woodville Karst plain. They intended to tame Okie-Heepki forever. It did not work. The immense pressure of the aquifer system and the sheer volume of water moving through the conduits simply bypassed or eroded their makeshift plug. The lake refilled with the next wet season, and the cycle continued. The cars and the concrete were simply swallowed by the geology, a footnote in a story millions of years old. The image of people trying to plug a geological feature with old Fords is something. Loki sent this to a friend who might appreciate the sheer audacity of it. The lake, it turned out, had its own schedule. But now, here is the detail that tells the real story. That old schedule is gone. The predictable, once-a-generation cycle that defined Lake Jackson for at least a century of observation has shattered. After the major dry down in 1982, which fit the old pattern, something changed. The lake drained again, dramatically, on September 16, 1999. Then it drained again in 2006, and again in 2012, and again in 2021. And then the most severe event in living memory began in late 2025. The interval has collapsed from a quarter century to just a few years. The question is no longer if the lake will drain, but when. And why the acceleration? The answer seems to lie in the delicate balance between rainfall, the aquifer, and increasing human demand on a finite resource. The mystery of the disappearing lake carried with it a second, more profound question. Where, exactly, does the water go? For decades, the assumption was that it simply dispersed into the vast Floridan Aquifer, its journey untraceable. But in 2021, the Florida Geological Survey, led by acting director and state geologist Guy Harley, decided to find out for certain. On August 14th, 2021, during another dry down, a team of geologists descended into the muddy maw of Porterhole Sink. They carried with them 100 pounds of a non-toxic fluorescent green dye called fluorescein, the very same dye used to turn the Chicago River green for St. Patrick's Day. They poured the brilliant green tracer into the stream of water still trickling into the sinkhole. And then they waited. They placed charcoal detectors, called bugs, at various springs and wells throughout the region, which would absorb the dye if it passed by. The goal, as Means stated, was to confirm a connection suspected for years, a connection that would help resource managers develop more informed strategies for managing the region's water. The prime suspect for the water's exit point was a place 19 miles to the south, Wakulla Spring. Wakulla Spring is one of the natural wonders of the world. It is one of the planet's largest and deepest freshwater springs, pumping out hundreds of millions of gallons of crystal clear water every single day from the mouth of a vast underwater cave. Its basin is a stunning turquoise blue, surrounded by cypress swamp, a protected state park teeming with life. For years, extreme technical cave divers with the Woodville Karst Plain Project, or WKPP, have been risking their lives to map the labyrinthine passages that feed the spring, pushing farther and farther into the earth. They knew the system was vast, but proving a direct, timely link to Lake Jackson was the missing piece. 35 days after the dye was poured into Porterhole Sink, the charcoal detectors at Wakulla Spring came back positive. The green tracer had appeared. The water from Lake Jackson had traveled 19 miles underground through the pitch-black limestone conduits of the upper Floridan Aquifer to re-emerge at the surface. The journey took just over a month, meaning the water moved at an average speed of about half a mile per day. The lake was not lost. It was on a slow, invisible commute beneath the pine forests and suburbs of Florida's capital city. The scale of this underground connection is genuinely hard to comprehend. Lake Jackson is a headwater for Wakulla Spring. So the lake doesn't just vanish, it travels. It's a detail worth knowing. You can subscribe if you want more videos that connect these dots. This discovery transforms the narrative. The pollution, runoff, and nutrient load of a 4,000 acre basin in Tallahassee directly impacts the water quality of a world-famous spring 19 miles away. What happens in Lake Jackson does not stay in Lake Jackson. And the lake is not just a geological curiosity. It is a living ecosystem that has been forced to adapt to this radical cycle of presence and absence. When the water drains, the consequences for aquatic life are immediate and severe. Fish like largemouth bass, bluegill, and gar become trapped in the few remaining deep pools, like Church Cove and McInnes Arm. Predators, from wading birds to bobcats, flock to these concentrated areas for an easy meal. The Florida Fish and Wildlife Conservation Commission notes that while these dry downs can be devastating in the short term, they can also serve as a natural reset, burning off accumulated muck on the lakebed and promoting the growth of healthy vegetation once the water returns. But it is in the microscopic world that the most astonishing adaptation is found. Dr. Thomas R. Sawicki, who runs the Groundwater Biodiversity Lab at Florida A&M University, has spent years studying the life that persists in the lake through these cycles. In 2022, his former graduate student, Andrew G. Cannizzaro, made a discovery that perfectly encapsulates the lake's bizarre nature. He identified a completely new species of crustacean, a tiny shrimp-like amphipod now named Krangonyx apalachi. This creature is endemic to Lake Jackson. It lives here and nowhere else on Earth. So how does a water-dwelling crustacean survive when its entire world, 12 billion gallons of it, drains away into a hole? The answer is as strange as the lake itself. Krangonyx apalachi has evolved to live with the cycle. When the water disappears, the amphipods don't all die. They vanish into the moist sediment, burrowing down into the wet grasses and root systems, finding refuge in the damp earth left behind. They wait in a state of suspended animation until the rains return and the basin refills. Then, as if resurrected, they emerge from the mud and repopulate the lake. They are biological proof that this cycle of disappearance is an ancient, fundamental part of the lake's identity. The existence of this creature, a doomsday prepper in shrimp form, tells us that Okehepke has been pulling this trick for a very, very long time. Yet, this evidence of an ancient pattern only makes the modern acceleration more alarming. If the cycle is natural, why is it happening so frequently now? The data points to a system under stress. The Northwest Florida Water Management District issued only its third water shortage warning in 26 years during the most recent drought. All 5 of Florida's water management districts are now under simultaneous shortage warnings, a reflection of a statewide water deficit. The pressure on the Floridan Aquifer, the very system that holds Lake Jackson's plug in place, is increasing. More people, more agriculture, and more frequent droughts mean the water table is being drawn down more often and more severely. The delicate balance of hydrostatic pressure is being disrupted. The disappearing lake might not be just a local spectacle. It may be a canary in the coal mine for the health of the entire aquifer system that provides drinking water to nearly 400. 0 people in the Tallahassee metro area alone. When the lake drains, it also becomes something else, an archaeological and paleontological site. The receding waters expose history. As local fossil hunters know well, the cave systems that connect to Wakulla Spring are famous for containing Ice Age fossils, including mastodon bones. When the plug is pulled on Lake Jackson, the floor of the lake becomes a treasure map. People flock to the exposed bed of Porter Hole Sink, scanning the mud for artifacts. They find ancient pottery shards from the Muskogee settlements, and occasionally the fossilized teeth of ancient sharks or other prehistoric creatures that lived here when the sea level was much higher. The dry down peels back the present and reveals the deep past. During the 2025-2026 event, as news helicopters filmed the cracked earth from above, dozens of people could be seen below, walking the desolate landscape, heads down, searching for a piece of lost time. Now, zoom out and consider the systemic stakes. The water draining from Lake Jackson is not pristine. It carries nutrients from lawns, contaminants from roads, and sediment from the basin. This entire cocktail is being mainlined directly into the Floridan Aquifer, the primary source of drinking water for the region. And its destination, Wakulla Spring, is already officially listed by the Florida Department of Environmental Protection as an impaired body of water, suffering from high nitrate levels that fuel algae growth and reduce its famous clarity. Adding 12 billion gallons of nutrient-rich lake water over the course of a few months is unlikely to help. The work done by organizations like the Wakulla Springs Alliance to protect the spring is now directly tied to the land use practices in a basin 19 miles to the north. The 2025-2026 dry down was the most thoroughly documented in history, unfolding in the age of social media and ubiquitous drones. It began with the drought declaration in the fall and the first signs of draining around Thanksgiving. By Christmas, water was visibly cascading into Porter Sink. By early 2026, the lake was a ghost of itself. A photo taken in April by the Tallahassee Democrat showed a bobcat trotting nonchalantly